Welcome to Overnight Market Brief, pre-market edition by AGI Era. Good morning. Today is Friday, January 16, 2026, and it is shortly after 8 a.m. Eastern Time. This is your executive summary of global market developments, analyzing the overnight flows in Asia and Europe, the key macro drivers, and the setup for the North American Open. The prior session and macro context. First, a look back at yesterday's close. Wall Street finished on a firm footing, driven by robust U.S. economic data. The S&P 500 settled at 6944, up 0.26%, while the Nasdaq 100 advanced 0.32% to close at 25547. Crucially, the session was driven by stronger than expected U.S. jobless claims and a surging Philadelphia Fed manufacturing index, which collectively dimmed hopes for aggressive Federal Reserve rate cuts. This narrative continues to influence macro assets. Right now, the 10-year Treasury yield is trading at 4.192, up 0.45%. The U.S. dollar index is marginally down at 99.04, but the broader sentiment remains one of dollar strength following the healthy economic data. Meanwhile, crude oil is up 1.25% around 59.82, and gold is down 0.41% at 4604.96. The slight uptick in the 10-year Treasury yield, while not dramatic, reflects the market's adjustment to a potentially less dovish Fed, acting as a subtle headwind for rate-sensitive sectors. Overnight session. Asia and Europe. Moving to the overnight session, global markets have been mixed with a cautious undertone. In Asia, the picture was largely defensive. In Tokyo, the Nikkei 25 finished down 0.32% at 53,936.17, tracking the broader sentiment of dimming Fed cut hopes and a firm dollar. Meanwhile, in Greater China, the Hang Seng declined 0.29% to 26844.96, while the Shanghai Composite fell 0.26% to 411.91. The unified weakness across Asia was driven by the strong U.S. data narrative, which suggests less global liquidity support. In Europe, major indices are trading with a cautious bias. The price action suggests a digestion of earlier German inflation data, which slowed to 2.0% in December. This provides a mixed lead-in for U.S. traders, as positive local data is weighed against global macro currents. U.S. futures in the open. Turning to the U.S. pre-market, equity futures are showing modest gains. S&P 500 futures are trading up 0.18% at 6994.25, while Nasdaq 100 futures are up 0.50% at 55835.5. The relative outperformance of Nasdaq 100 futures suggests investors are rotating slightly into growth names, possibly anticipating that the current yield levels are manageable, or perhaps a technical rebound after yesterday's session. The daily catalyst. Looking ahead to the session, investors are focused on three key catalysts. First, the continued market digestion of yesterday's strong U.S. economic data, particularly the jobless claims and Philadelphia Fed manufacturing index, which are shaping Federal Reserve expectations. Second, the implications of the slowing German inflation data for European monetary policy and broader economic sentiment. And finally, the ongoing narrative around U.S. dollar strength, which remains a critical factor for global asset flows. With a light economic calendar for upcoming Tier 1 events, flows may be driven primarily by technical positioning and the market's evolving interpretation of recent data. Given the overnight setup in rates and the dollar, the market's path of least resistance appears to be range-bound with a slight upside bias for U.S. equities, pending any surprises from the data releases. That concludes your overnight market brief. Disclaimer: this podcast is not financial advice. Data may be delayed or inaccurate. Always conduct your own due diligence.